Should you give the debt collector money? What if you already did? Brought to you by Kenneth Chabert at yourlegallegup.com. Your advantage if you're being sued by debt collectors. Sometimes people tell me they've given a debt collector money, and sometimes I think they have, but they don't want to say. Well, should you give a debt collector money? And what does it mean if you have given money to the debt collector who is now suing you? It isn't always a bad idea to give a debt collector money. If you can make a deal that you can afford to pay in exchange for the debt being completely settled, that could make sense, especially if you can get the debt off your credit report. But if you can't do that, and if you're just trying to get the debt collector off your back for a little while, or if you can't afford to pay, but you're feeling guilty, it can be a very bad idea to pay anything at all. Payments can extend the statute of limitations sometimes, but not always. Suppose, for example, that you haven't made a payment on a credit card account that's 3 years overdue, and you pay a debt collector $100 of your $7,000 balance. If you do that as part of an agreement that the collector will stop bugging you for some period of time, you may be tolling, that's another way of saying stopping, the statute of limitations for the agreed upon amount of time. But unless you go much further and agree to make specified payments over time, probably in exchange for some other changes of terms, you probably haven't done what's called a novation of the agreement, which would create an entirely separate agreement and a new breach of contract if you stop paying. But what if you simply pay the $100 after hanging up on the debt collector because you feel guilty, or because you hope the guy will cut you a break next time if he sees you made a payment this time? Apart from making a bad judgment regarding collectors, have you done anything to the statute of limitations? I would suggest not. You haven't affected the collector's right to sue you, haven't made any new agreements, and haven't taken your account out of default. You've just made some jerk a little richer, and yourself a little poorer. They will argue that you've told or reset the statute of limitations, but I'd give it some thought before accepting that one sitting down. Was it an admission that you owed the money? A much more likely way the $100 you paid them will come back to haunt you is if it was taken as an admission that you owed them the money. They will certainly argue that it was. And the way that argument goes is like this. The debt collector says, he gave us the $100. That means he admits he owes us money because no one would pay $100 without owing it. If you pay a debt collector, you will hear this argument, and it does have some force. An admission does not have to be explicit, and if you admit that you owe the debt collector money at any time, by word or deed, you may relieve the debt collector of the burden of proving that you owe it the money. In plain English, that means you may make it so that they don't have to prove you owe them anything. And since they have a very hard time of proving that on their own, and they often can't or won't, it may be the worst way you ever spent your money. If you've done it, though, all is not necessarily lost. You need a persuasive reason for having done it that does not admit that you owed the money, in order to undo the admission. For example, you might say that they threatened you in some way or told you facts that you later checked and found to be untrue. We all know that debt collectors threaten people all the time, and sometimes people give them money when threatened, whether they owe it or not. You're just going to have to make that argument to keep your payment from being proof that you owed them the money in the first place. A counterclaim under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act for unfair or coercive debt collection would obviously promote that explanation. Protect what's yours and don't let the debt collectors rip you off. My site and materials can help. Go to yourlegallegup.com. Get my litigation manual and forums, or get the videos and defend yourself. You'll be glad that you did. You may not consider this video or anything I say in this or any video as legal advice. I cannot give you legal advice, but as a former lawyer, I do know the legal process and debt law very well. So use what I say as a source of information and apply your own judgment to your case. To get more help on fighting debt collectors and their lawsuits, go to yourlegallegup.com. Get my litigation manual and forums. If you appreciate this video, please take a second and like it, subscribe, and friend me, as these things will help others find my videos and begin to learn more about the debt litigation process. Defend yourself from the debt collectors. on Facebook or YouTube, as these things help others find my videos and begin to learn more about the debt litigation process. Defend yourself from the debt collectors.